Hi guys, Zach here from BIMteriors, and today we're talking about floors, everything you need to know about floors. We're going to start with how to create a floor, all of the tools available to you while creating your floor, from basic rectangular shapes to organic shapes using arcs and curves. But we won't be stopping there. We'll be digging deeper into creating patterns for these floors, and generically, the out of the box tools that we have available to us in Revit are very limiting. And so today I'm going to be showing you a feature, showing you a plugin called pyRevit that allows us to really think outside the box when it comes to creating these patterns using lines. And then simply by just grabbing those lines and creating a pattern to them. And then this way it gives us the ability to then apply it to the floors, then mimicking exactly that design intent that we wanted from that design development. So can't wait to jump into this week and start to kind of go and show you how this workflow actually works. All right, let's jump right into it. All right, so we're going to break this down into two parts for this tutorial. The first part will go over how to create floors, the workflows to create these floors, and the tools that you have accessible to you while creating them. And then at that point, we'll jump into part two of this session, and how to create the most unique patterns you can possibly think of. And by creating those lines, and how do we actually create a pattern from the lines that we created using the pyRevit tool. So to start, let's create a floor. And what you're going to do is at the top of your ribbon at the architecture tab, you're going to go to the built environment here, and then you're going to find floors. Now, once you have floors, select on the floors. At this point, it brings you into the modify tab, giving you and prompting you up to the tools that you have available to you to start drawing these floors. Now, for this example, I'm going to kind of scroll into this bedroom. This is where we're going to want to create a new floor. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to find the draw tools, and in this case here, just a line, and I'm going to start to draw my floor. Now, as you're drawing your floor, keep in mind that this has to be fully enclosed for this to work, or you will get an error message. So I think what I'll do here is I won't fully enclose it. I'll kind of stop it shy, just so that when I go to actually think, okay, maybe potentially I thought I fully enclosed this and I'm ready, and I hit okay. So if it's not fully enclosed, this is the note that you're going to get. It's going to say, the loop must be closed. So at this point, we don't want to quit sketching, but we want to hit continue, and I want to fully enclose that. Now, also keep in mind, as before you hit your green arrow, your check mark that you are complete, pan over to the properties and see what kind of floor you're even creating. So at that point, you can kind of drop down your floor options, and you can potentially pick from a floor that you want. Or at this point, if you want to create a new floor, I'll walk you through the same steps. And in this case here, I'm going to take a generic, for example, and to edit the type, this is going to be very similar to how we created new walls. The best thing and the best approach is to always duplicate, because you might not know where this floor is within your project. And if it is somewhere and you start to modify, edit it, it will edit it throughout the project. So safest bet is to typically duplicate it and create a new floor. And in this case here, we're going to kind of call list test, and I'm going to hit OK. And at this point as well, what you can do is change the structure if it needs to be changed. So in this case here, you can come into the type parameters under construction, and in the structure tab, you can hit edit, and this is where you're able to edit the assembly for this floor. So in this case here, we might just change this thickness. Potentially we're creating some sort of tile finish, and maybe we're going to put ½ inch to this tile thickness. And in this case here, we'll keep it as resin floor for now until we create this pattern and put a material to that pattern as well, so that we can actually change this in the floor itself. So once we've done editing the edit the assembly, we can hit OK. Once we're done with the type properties, we can also hit OK. So now we've got our floor test for this example. and I'm going to hit the check mark. So if you do get this message, all that that's saying is that there's already a floor created. So here, potentially, there is a floor created, and that floor might be, that could be from the linked model. That is the actual architectural floor, structural floor. So in that case here, we want to potentially start to offset this. And so this is where sometimes a little math will come into play, depending on the thickness of that assembly. If we want to sit just perfectly on top, in this case here, we're going to change this to 13. So then this way here, that does sit above our floor. So that was part one on how to create a floor. Super easy workflow, but now what we're going to do is we're going to jump in and we want to give it a unique pattern from something that we saw from one of our references, and we want to make sure that we're replicating that in our drawing package. Okay, so at this point, we've created a floor that suits the design. And now at this point, we want to create a pattern. So how do we go from creating these 2D lines and making a pattern out of them? So in the past, Revit's out-of-the-box tools to be able to create custom hatch patterns are very limiting. And what I've seen in the past is that designers, architects will kind of use these cheat tools and either create just line work, group them together, and that's fine. But the second that you have to edit that or you want certain alignments or rotations, it's very challenging to manipulate that group and get it the way that you want it to work without spending so much time. So using this tool called pyRevit, it's allowing us to kind of create this little pattern, and we get to decide what that looks like using these lines, and then using this tool creating a pattern. So in this way here, think about it as you can use this pattern to apply to filled regions and walls or anything that has a material that you can actually put a pattern to. And in this example, we're going to be doing floors. So how to do it, where to start, make sure first you've downloaded pyRevit. And again, this is a free plugin, so download it. Once it's downloaded, it will show up in the top of your ribbon as pyRevit. Now, what you do want to do is open up a drafting view. So once you've opened up a drafting view, you want to start to kind of think about the steps that it's going to take. And so what I've done is I've broken this down to 4 steps. So we're going to kind of think about the shapes, we're going to think about the pattern, and at this point, we're going to kind of want to think about how this is going to repeat. So in this way here, while that repeats itself, it's making sense and it's repeating itself properly. So in this way here in a larger area, it's seamless. And that at this point, we'll create a field region to make sure that it works. So step 1 is think about the shapes. So again, this is all just line work. So this is where you can come to the top of your ribbon in the Annotate tab and go to the detail portion and hit detail line. So this is where you can start to kind of have fun and start creating your pattern. So in this specific example, in this pattern, I realized that, okay, maybe there's 2 shapes that are starting to repeat themselves, and I've grouped them together. So in this case here, we'll go down and we'll kind of walk through this together. I've grouped it together, and I'm going to just kind of copy this over here. And at this stage, there's so many different ways you can do this. You can just use detail lines for the entire sketch, and that's fine. You can create a group. You can then copy them to wherever it's going to happen, or you can use the array command. So whatever is the most efficient to you is absolutely fine. For today's exercise, for me, the most efficient way is to array these. And so I'm going to select my group, and I'm going to start to array to the pattern that I have in mind. So I'm going to go and select my group, and in the modify detail groups, I'm going to use the array tool, and I'm going to say array from one point to another. And since I already have this drawn up here, it's going to be slightly easier. And at that case here, I'm going to say maybe 4 across. And I'm starting to kind of now think about this pattern. After doing this, I'm going to select all and do the same step. So I'm going to go and array them from one point to another. And again, This will be easier for myself, again, because I have a reference ahead of me. So this might take a little longer for you to kind of start to draw the design that you have envisioned or that you're referencing. And I'm just going to draw 8 down. So you can kind of see it's starting to take place. And at this point, I'm going to do the same thing with the square that I have here. So once I've got it copied over, I'm going to use the same array tool. And I'm going to come from here and array it from one spot to the other, and then hitting a value that how many of these do we want to start to create. And I'm going to again go 4. And what you can do is select all those rather than single copy one by one by one. I want to do them all together at once. So as you can see, we're starting to kind of create that pattern. Now I'm not going to go through every single step of these because again, I want to make sure that we're kind of keeping on track with our time, but you're getting the point. We're starting to kind of create these lines. All they are 2D lines at this point. And we're going to get to a point where we're created the pattern and we're ready to kind of we're ready to make it an actual pattern rather than just line types. So at this point, you're going to want to start to think about how are you going to cut this off, and at what point does it make sense for it to start repeating itself? Because this is only going to capture a small portion of this pattern, and you want to make sure that you're trimming it and creating a region that as it repeats seamlessly. So in this case here, what I've done is I've created reference lines to help guide me start to kind of trim up these lines so that it's going to be seamless. And at this point, what you're going to want to do is select all those lines. Once it's selected, it's as easy as this. Go to your pyRevit at the top of your ribbon. So once you've hit pyRevit, and in the, where are you, Modify tab, there is a tool called Make Pattern. And so when you have this selected, we're going to want to give it a name. So we're going to want to make a pattern. In this case here, we're going to call this test as well. And then we've got the options to do pattern type. So there's 2 types of patterns within Revit. A detailed pattern will be something that as the scale changes, so does your pattern. So if this was drawn at 1 to 10, or if this was drawn at 1 to 50, it will adjust accordingly to how you have it detailed. Now, in this case here, I'm going to use a model pattern, and because these are going to be the exact dimensions and the exact scale that I want these to be at any scale from 1 to 100 or 1 to 50 or 1 to 20, I always want it to be this size. So at that point, I want this to be a modeled pattern. We can create a filled region. So once we've created our pattern, it will automatically create a filled region for us. Now, you can leave this checked on or off depending on how you want to use it. But in this example, I'm going to check this on. Now, before I say create pattern, just one more little tip and trick is that so many of us spend so much time battling creating hatches within CAD. And sometimes creating pat files within CAD is extremely difficult as well. So you can use this tool to export pat files into CAD and create hatch patterns from those pat files. Just kind of a little tips and tricks that if this is going to be an easier workflow to go this way and then bring it to CAD, please use it. So at this point, we're done. We've selected the lines that we want to start to create a pattern from. We want to hit create pattern. So at this point, it's going to ask us to pick the lower left-hand corner. So I'm going to zoom in here and pick the lower left-hand corner. It's going to ask us to pick the top right-hand corner. So I'm going to zoom into the top right and select it. And at this point, if we did it right, it should say that it has completed and created the hatch. Fabulous. So at this point, we can test it out. And what we can do is, because we hit select create a filled region, we should just be able to test it out by going to annotate and selecting filled region and finding that filled region that we just created. So example test, fabulous. Now we can maybe just draw a circle to really take a look at, see how it came. But you can see here, no matter what shape is drawn, that it's now starting to create that pattern, which is fabulous. And it seems to be repeating itself nicely, which is also nice. Sometimes it doesn't always work that way. And sometimes it's a little back and forth until you find what that, I'm going to say, region is, so that it repeats itself seamlessly. The other cool thing about modeled patterns is that I can select any one of these lines and start to move these. So in this way here, your whole hatch or your whole region starts to move as one, which is really great. So then this way here, when you're on your floor plan and you have a specific alignment, that might be a wall, it might be whatever that might be, you can now start to be like, okay, our start pattern or start tile is going to be at this location. The other great thing is that you can rotate it as well. So potentially it wanted to be aligned to a wall that was maybe on a 25-degree angle. You can start to rotate this as well. So now that we've created our floor, we've created a really cool, unique, custom pattern, how do we apply that to the floor? So I'm going to go back to level 2 and go back to our bedroom. And remember that we created this floor and we've offset it, that 13 mil. So in this way here, it is that thickness of the assembly that we're creating. So it sits perfectly on that existing floor that's already there. And we're kind of just building up on top of that. We're going to make sure that we've got our new floor that we've created. We're going to go to edit type. We're going to edit the structure, and we're going to want to start to create a material with this new pattern that we just created. So I'm going to, in the material column, select on the material, and at this point, we're going to be prompted up in the material browser. So we probably won't have a material that we can pick from just yet. So what we're going to do is we're going to create/duplicate. So we might want to duplicate the material and assets. And I'm going to call this test A, for example. So this way here, we can kind of keep track of it. And within our test A, under the graphics, you can see here surface pattern. We can now apply a pattern that we just created. So I'm going to hit on the pattern portion. And remember, you've got your drafting and your modeled patterns. We want to go to a model one. And we're going to want to find our material that we have as test. So once you've found it, select it, hit OK. You can play around with colors as well. So in this case, we might want to have fun with this, and I'm going to make this a pink pattern and hit OK. So we've created our pattern, we've created a material, we've assigned a pattern to that. I'm going to hit OK, OK, and OK. And you see that we now have that pattern started to be created. And it was that simple. It was as simple as creating those lines, creating that pattern using those lines. And at that point, using the pyRevit tool, grabbing those lines and creating a pattern for it. So in this way here, there's no restrictions on the limits that you can go to designing these patterns for your floors and being able to replicate them in your working drawings. And the great thing about these patterns, as we already went through in our filled regions, is that you can start to align these. So for example, if I wanted this rectangular to start perfectly on that wall corner, well, what we can do is we can go to the modify and use the align tool and start to align these elements. So this way here, it perfectly now starts at that corner. That's a wrap on floors and pyRevit. So hopefully that you learned something new today with if that was creating a floor, if that was going from a generic floor, rectangular floor to creating organic shapes, or if that was now jumping into pyRevit and really stepping outside that box. So in this way here, you're not restricted to the type of patterns that you have available to you and giving you the capability to create anything that you have envisioned in your mind using this new pyRevit tool. If you're hearing this message, it means that you've watched this tutorial all the way to the end. And for that, I thank you. Please like and subscribe now to gain access to new Revit content weekly.